Well, this would be a pretty big change in the SEC and for Georgia. I was listening to Paul Finebaum talk to Brent Musburger. I don't know if you remember Brent Musburger from your youth or not, or some of y'all weren't even alive, I guess. But he was the old CBS guy, and eventually, went to ESPN. They were talking about the future, and one thing that Brent Musburger was saying to Paul was that the SEC needs to join the Big Ten and go into a 9-game schedule. And Paul essentially he said, "I think we're pretty close to that." Now, let me be clear about what's going on. And obviously, in 24 the schedule's set, and 25 the schedule's set too. So every team that Georgia plays this season at home, they're going to play away next year, and vice versa in terms of the road games. Of course, the Gators will be in Jacksonville. I don't know what's going to happen in Jacksonville in terms of clearly they're not going to have a game with 40,000 people in it in 2020, whatever, 7. But Georgia will be in Jacksonville about forever from here on out. So the notion that something's going to change there is wrong. But they will go to probably Atlanta for, I would say almost certainly Atlanta. And the other question is, will it be in Orlando? Will it be in Tampa? Could you do it in, I don't think anybody wants to go down to Miami that are the Gator people won't want to go down there, but I digress. A 9-game SEC schedule, and the Florida game actually matters a lot on this front, because if you're Georgia, you have for ever only ever had either, every other year you've had 3 home games in league play. That's it. And next season those games will be Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, and Kentucky. So that is a who's who of a home schedule. That is a heck of a home schedule. And of course, they shouldn't have any issues with fan demand or tickets or complaining about the schedule then. We'll see though. Georgia fans are good at complaining, that's for sure. I see that every day down below. But if you were to go to a 9-game in 2026, there's some challenges to that on a couple of different levels. And when Paul talks about this, he's not some idiot. This is not, Joe from Dothan or whatever. This is someone that is a very important person for Disney, and someone who has at least a chronic, but certainly I would say an acute understanding of what's going on in terms of television and the Southeastern Conference. I would say I have an acute understanding of it as well, but I don't work for Disney. So what's going on right now is that the SEC, University of Georgia, and the SEC have an agreement with Disney until 2036. And there is a look-in. I can report to you, I'm not guessing here, that there's a look-in time where the league and its partner, Disney, can take a look at what things are like and sort of not renegotiate, but come to a different agreement, a slightly altered agreement. And that agreement would be, in this scenario, there's only one reason to have a look-in, which is to add games. And that look-in will give them, you have 24 and 25 before, you can have a season and a half of looking at things before you decide. And then the playoff too comes into. There's so much. There's a lot of moving parts in college football right now. There's fewer moving parts than there were, but there's a lot of moving parts. And the SEC is going to sit there and say, why are we going to add a 9th game if that means 9 more losses to our teams? That means not more revenue right now, at least. Why would we do it for those 2 things? Why would we hurt ourselves in terms of the playoff, not have more money, and add an extra loss to everybody's schedule? Like, if you're Mississippi State, why are you voting for another game? Well, the answer is money. It's very simple. And you can see where all of this is going, okay, y'all? The schools we're going to go to 9. The question is when. And the answer is probably 26. And the reason why is twofold. Well, it's probably singularly this. It's great for everybody. It's great for the schools. That's more revenue. Okay, that would be an additional game of revenue. And it would also allow the SEC to appropriately capture their value as it relates to Disney. They are undervalued, okay, in the marketplace. They are undervalued. They are not drastically undervalued, but they're undervalued. They just are. And they know it, by the way. But they're not freaking out about it. Like, there's no one's, like, head is blowing up like this is the ACC. The people in the SEC, I'm not talking about Georgia, and I'm not talking about the SEC office. I'm talking globally here. They understand that their value is not correct with Disney right now. But they don't want a different partner. They want their partner, which is Disney. The problem is right now that player costs have actually started now. And you have that problem. And it's going to be harder and harder to run this like an actual business when you actually have to pay your employees. Some of us have businesses where we've always paid our employees, and this whole, facade about how NCAA, I mean, like, as a former NCAA athlete, it's all totally a lie. It's hilarious. I mean, it just, at the Division I level, they're totally taking advantage of the players for years. At the Division II level, they're just using it for enrollment purposes. It's a total con game, or it has been. Now it's not. And the schools understand that that they have to have more revenue. And there's only so much revenue to go around from boosters. Although at particular schools, Georgia, Texas A&M, Texas, probably Alabama, but after a while, you're getting to, like, South Carolina's not got as many big money boosters as Georgia. Like, I don't know how many $1 million plus donors there are at Carolina. I can think of one immediately, but there's not tons of them. Same problem, if you want to call it that, at Clemson. Tennessee, Florida. The big schools, they can hang in there, but if you're Auburn, like, you're getting put in a disadvantage. Auburn's not poor, but compared to Georgia, it's not the same. So that's a big, that's a big part of all of this. Is there's actually this is actually really commerce now, not this insanity where you're not paying your employees. So there's pressure there, and another game brings revenue in, A, and then B, Disney has a lot more to sell with a 9th game. That's 18 more games, y'all. I mean, technically speaking, each school would add a game. All right, so you're talking about it's not a weekend. It's kind of like 2 weekends. You're kind of adding 2 weekends of football, and my suspicion is you're going to shift the calendar forward a little bit. We may or may not start college football on Labor Day anymore. We'll see. No, I don't get to make these choices. We may or may not start college football on Labor Day. There may be week 0 may become week 1, but we're not there yet. Adding a 9th game in the SEC, at that point, you're going to start seeing Georgia play its opener against South Carolina, or Vanderbilt going to Texas A&M, Florida going to Kentucky. I mean, like, you're going to have to start playing games earlier. Georgia's second game is an SEC game. It used to be that that wasn't the case. It was their first and second game. They were Carolina, Tennessee, boom, and that was just like right off the bat in the 90s. That changed over time, and I think that helped Georgia, but always South Carolina was the second game, and it was an important game. In the Big Ten, the problem in the Big Ten is, they're playing 3-ish games and they're going 9 in a row, boom. That's tough, man. Like, that's hard to pull that off. And sometimes people have been creative and good. Ohio State, they'll play Indiana on the road to open the year. You can see that more with, like, Georgia. Georgia will never play. I'm sorry I'm ranting now, but just hang in there. Georgia will literally never play a home game that's not on a Saturday. You can say the same thing about Alabama. I would say almost certainly Florida. I mean, the big marquee, institutions, they're not going to play home games on a Saturday, on games other than Saturday, days other than Saturday. I would love Thursday, a Thursday night opener, okay? But that's not happening. I'm talking about opening weekend here for the record. because the SEC is not going to play. I mean, with the exception of like Black Friday, Thanksgiving, they're just it's going to be Saturdays. But we've seen Tennessee, we've seen Missouri, we've seen them play their home opener on a Thursday. All of these things are to help their partner. The SEC legitimately and completely, I can report this too, they view Disney as a partner, not as a business, not as like a vendor, I guess you could say. They don't know that it's not that at all. They are in bed with them completely. I mean, we should have known a long time ago, whether anyone was admitting it or not, that Disney was going to get all of these games and they were going to put all of them on ABC. We should have seen that in 2012. That wasn't so obvious then. But the longer that went on, CBS was not a good partner with the SEC to keep that contract at $55 million. Just not a good. It's a great business deal for CBS and the SEC schools. That was a horrible deal. There's no doubt. There's really no black or white with all of this. It's a lot of gray. Well, really a lot of green. But there should have been a lot more green for the SEC schools. Adding a ninth game, in my opinion, without the additional revenue is bad business. And I understand that Greg Sankey is far more qualified than me to decide and point the schools in the right direction. But I'm not an idiot either. And you have to, the value is a little low. And this is the perfect time to recalibrate what the relationship is between the SEC and Disney. And I think that will happen. We'll see. I think that will happen. They're getting paid a lot of money from Disney. Don't get me wrong. But what probably held Disney back a little bit at the time in 2020 was they knew they had the NBA stuff looming in 2020, right now, 2024. So they didn't want to overpay for the SEC and lose all those NBA games, including the finals and all that stuff. The SEC, as great as it is really predicated on the football season. It's gotten better in basketball. The NBA stretches for them from October to June. You really don't get that with SEC programming. You do, and they don't have an NBA channel like the SEC network and all this. They don't have an NBA network. Maybe they will. I don't know. I mean, Disney is going to find a strategic partner for ESPN, and that could be the NFL. That's who I would do. There's no more powerful brand in this world, probably even the world of sports, than the NFL. So I think, when in the grand scheme of things, when you step back and you take a look at what will a ninth game be, I am almost 13 minutes. I am 13 minutes in this video. I talk very little about what's happening on the field, because what Paul and Brent Musburger were talking about, that is a straight up business decision. That is not about what's happening on the field, because what's happening on the field is, if you had a ninth game this season, Georgia would be playing Missouri, or Georgia would be playing Arkansas, or LSU. They would not be playing Oklahoma, but that's what would be happening. Or, excuse me, they'd be playing South Carolina. They probably would be playing South Carolina. Carolina is not happy they're not playing Georgia, but that's another conversation for another day. When you do that, they'll do that with the SEC. When you do that, you're going to bring in more revenue. It makes things make more sense in terms of the value that you're getting from from Disney. I think it will be a very good, when that happens, will be a very good thing. It's not overdue, but it needs to happen. It's something that's important. And I think that was a great, I wish Paul, folks don't understand the business side of all of this and how important the SEC network is to Disney and the SEC. That's not just backslapping. That is a critical component of what the Southeastern Conference is doing, period. And certainly it's important to Disney, but it is a critical thing for the SEC. And it's not bad for Disney. I mean, it's not a bad, all you have to do is add the money up and split it. And that's how much, that's a lot of money. And they just added 2 more programs, and one in a different state. What is going to be even more curious is, does the ACC fall apart to where you can go get North Carolina and Virginia? That's another question for another day. Thanks for watching.